Look at how we measure a successful life. We check the pedigree of a university degree. We verify job titles, bank accounts, and family names. We rely on strict categorization to determine who belongs in the room and who gets locked out. We naturally assume the spiritual world operates on the exact same point system. If you want divine grace, you need a flawless spiritual resume, an immaculate lineage, rigid daily purity rituals, and decades spent memorizing Vedic texts. But there is a glaring mathematical problem with that assumption. If absolute perfection and scholarly mastery are the strict prerequisites for divine connection, then spirituality is permanently out of reach for the vast majority of humanity. A classical Indian text called the Bhaktamal exists specifically to dismantle this illusion of exclusivity. It is a compilation of biographies detailing the lives of saints and devotees throughout history. The text centers on a principle called sharanagati. Sharanagati means total, unconditional surrender to the divine. The text argues that this surrender is the ultimate equalizer, cutting right through all of our artificial human metrics. To prove this, the text highlights 3 highly specific individuals side by side. Their backgrounds break every societal rule imaginable. One is a demon, one is a tribal outcast, and one is a literal beast. The first subject is Vibhishana. By every worldly metric of his era, his lineage disqualified him from righteousness. He was a rakshasa, a species often translated as a demon, born directly into the royal dynasty of Lanka, a kingdom built entirely on violence and ego. When his older brother, King Ravana, abducted Sita, Vibhishana stood up in open court. He argued for her release based strictly on righteous conduct. The court mocked him, called him a traitor, and drove him out. He left his home, crossed the ocean, and approached Rama's camp seeking refuge. Rama's generals warned that Vibhishana was a hostile spy. Rama dismissed the warnings entirely. He declared a permanent vow: anyone who approaches seeking shelter, even once, is accepted immediately. Rama then crowned Vibhishana king of Lanka before the war even started. There is a secondary story about Vibhishana that captures what his level of devotion actually looks like in practice. A merchant ship broke apart at sea, and a single survivor washed ashore in Lanka, directly into the territory of the Rakshasas. When guards dragged this terrified human before King Vibhishana, the king leapt from his throne in ecstasy. Seeing a human face reminded him of the human form of his beloved Rama. Vibhishana dressed the stranded merchant in divine jewels, performed ceremonial worship for him, and stood at his door with a golden staff as a humble guard. A lineage of hostility was completely overwritten. The devotion was so absolute that a king born to a dynasty of demons treated a soaking wet castaway as a living mirror of the divine. Vibhishana possessed royal wealth, but the second devotee, Shabari, started at the absolute bottom of the social ladder. She was born into a tribal community, a background the broader society of her time viewed with severe prejudice and completely excluded from formal spiritual education. She found her way to the ashram of the sage Matanga. Knowing the resident scholars would reject her, she served in secret. Long before the scholars woke, she swept the dirt paths, drew water, and gathered firewood, completing the humblest tasks while asking for zero recognition. Her guru promised her that the divine would eventually visit that exact spot, so she waited. For decades, she swept those same paths.
She gathered wild forest berries, taking a small bite out of each one to test its flavor, keeping only the sweetest for her expected guest and throwing the bitter ones away. When Rama finally arrived in the forest, the usual dynamic of spiritual seeking inverted. The devotee didn't have to launch a massive pilgrimage to find the divine. Rama asked the local forest dwellers specifically where Shabari lived and walked directly to her door. She offered him the pile of half-eaten berries. According to strict ritual purity laws, offering tasted food is a severe offense. Rama ignored the rules entirely and ate the berries with obvious joy, focusing only on the decades of patient love behind the meal. This animated diagram illustrates the traditional view of spiritual hierarchy, structured like a rigid pyramid. You have the educated scholars placed firmly at the top and the humble servants pinned to the bottom.
During their meeting, Rama outlines Navada Bhakti, the ninefold path of devotion, which includes practices like listening, serving, and total surrender. He tells Shabari she embodies all 9 perfectly. A moment of wonder. And with that declaration, the entire structure flips. Shabari proves that a person's worldly social standing is entirely irrelevant. Silent, pure service bypasses decades of scholarly pride to capture the direct attention of the divine. The third story removes the human element entirely. Jatayu was a vulture. He was an elderly bird, categorized by the texts of the time as an impure eater of dead flesh, lacking human intellect or the ability to recite prayers. When Jatayu heard Sita screaming from Ravana's flying chariot, he didn't calculate his odds of survival against an armored, invincible warlord. He just attacked. He tore apart Ravana's chariot, smashed his weapons, and fought until the warlord drew a sword and severed both the bird's wings. Jatayu plummeted to the earth, broken and bleeding out. But he refused to die. He forced his body to hold on to a single thread of life for one reason. He had to stay conscious long enough to tell Rama exactly which direction Ravana had taken Sita. When Rama found the dying bird, he took Jatayu into his lap and wept. After Jatayu delivered his final message and passed away, Rama gathered wood and performed the vulture's last rites with his own hands. A creature the world dismissed as an impure scavenger received the exact same funeral honors Rama would have given his own human father. Biological form and ritual status meant absolutely nothing in the face of an ultimate, selfless sacrifice. Look at the baseline facts of these 3 lives. Not a single one of them had mastered Vedic texts. None of them possessed recognized ritual purity. None of them held acceptable societal power. This diagram shows 3 rigid barriers assumed to block grace: lineage, society, and biology. But the divine ignores the exterior vessel, measuring only what is inside. That internal quality is prema, pure, selfless love. It is the singular qualification, completely wiping out every other boundary. The Bhaktamal preserves these specific accounts to strip away our own excuses. When we say we're too flawed, too uneducated, or too disconnected to begin a spiritual path, we are enforcing rules that the divine actively ignores. Total surrender elevated a hostile demon, a marginalized outcast, and a dying vulture. If grace can reach them, then the path is universally open to absolutely anyone, no matter where your starting line happens to be.